Hey, welcome back. This time we're gonna talk about kegs. So when it comes to packaging finished beer, that means beer that's completely fermented out, you've let it chill for a while, you gotta serve it somehow. So kind of the ultimate way of doing that as a home brewer is to have a kegerator or a keezer, and we'll get into how those work in a minute, but first I wanna explain to you how kegs work. Traditionally, brewers will start with bottling, and then now we even have canning that's very popular. But to be able to can, I like keeping things in kegs, carbonating in kegs because I get to burst carbonate, and kind of the key to all of that is understanding how to use a keg and including that into your setup. So let's get right into it. Basically, a keg is nothing more than a vessel that can be pressurized, keeping oxygen and any kind of outside influence out while also keeping all the goodness in. So it's just a container, okay? So on these kegs, this is a torpedo. The other option is what you're commonly gonna see floating around, and that is essentially remnants from when Pepsi and Coca-Cola used to serve sodas to restaurants and stuff in kegs just like these. So on the homebrew scale, the ball lock or pin lock are the most common connector types, and I'll show you how those work. So I use ball lock. The connections and fittings just seem to be more readily available, and that is what this looks like. So this is a gas ball lock connector, and then you have the liquid side, which kind of fits a little bit different, and I'll show you that. Generally, black is for the liquid and gray is for gas. And those hook onto these. So what is underneath these? So you're gonna see this label that's got an inside and an out. So that's liquid out, gas in, right? Because you're gonna put CO2 into this side. So what's happening is you have a dip tube that goes down on the liquid side all the way down to the bottom of the keg. So this is a 2 gallon or 2.5 gallon. So it's short. I thought it would be easier for demonstration purposes. It works exactly the same in the 5 gallon and the 10 gallons. I also have 10 gallon kegs. They're just bigger and rounder, and they just hold more liquid, but they all work the same. So this post hovers just above the bottom. You're gonna put CO2 into the top, and that's putting a little bit of pressure on there, which is pushing that beer down. It wants to come out of the liquid post. So once you hook up the liquid post, this goes to either a draft line or a bottling gun, or even, you remember the little party keg taps? You can do that too. You're gonna have foam issues, but it is what it is. So this dip tube lives down into the bottom. Traditional Sankey kegs, like the ones that restaurants and breweries are using right now, they're a little bit different. They have a center spear, so it's a single lock basically, and that goes straight down to the bottom of the center. These are offset, so they're off to the side a little bit. So inside this, so there's a little gasket up here at the top. That's gonna rest right there. This is what the actual ball lock connector looks like. So inside it, here's the anatomy. This is a solid piece. You've got a gasket or an O-ring across the top, but inside of that is a spring, and this is called a poppet. So that poppet has its own gasket, and it's going to be spring loaded basically into that hole. So that's what's keeping all of your beer from escaping. That screws right onto this post, and you can tighten it up. You can use the right size socket. If some are different sizes, all of mine I tried to standardize so that they would work. Or you can just go with pliers. So to keep these O-rings happy, this is kind of a side note, it is a very cheap version of insurance to just get replacement kits. You can get them on Amazon. I'll put the link down below to where you can find these on More Beer. When you buy a keg, these were in use from Pepsi or Coke or whoever for years and years and years. They probably sat in a warehouse, hot and stinky with soda residue down in the bottom. You're gonna need to clean them, and then the first thing I always do is I just replace all of it. And then actually on that note, this is the lid. So this big ring is the lid. So let me finish this first. So that's the outside, that's the liquid side. On the inside, you don't need that post to go all the way down to the bottom. So it's just a little short guy. He just sits right above the level of the liquid, and the same spring load with the poppet is right there, and it fits snugly up to that. So I would just tighten those down until they are snug. You're not trying to smash the gaskets. It's just pretty much, you know, hand tight and then a quarter turn with a wrench or pliers. And then this is the lid. Built into the lid is a pressure relief valve. I can't remember what the actual pressure is that these would let off, but essentially it's spring loaded, and you gotta kind of pull on there. I wanna say it's like over 100 pounds of pressure. These things can really get pressurized. You're likely never going to deal with anything over 45 pounds of CO2 pressure in there, and that's only when you're burst carbonating as well. So short period of time, 12 to 24 hours at that pressure, then you're gonna vent it and keep it at like 13 to 15 pounds, kind of depending on your kegerator. So you'll have to figure that out with your line length, and that's gonna change how your beer behaves when it comes out of the taps. More foamy, less foamy, fast or slow. But essentially, this pressure relief valve is a safety check, so it always needs to be there. And with the replacement kit, I also replaced those. So those can get, you know, the spring wears out or gets old with time, but that just turns right out. Pops right out. So I can tell this is a new one too. These lids are easy to use. You hold it, that's the handle. You pop it into the top, turn it to where it lines up, and then that's it. Very easy to use, very secure. You can snug it in place. And when you put the pressure on there, you'll kind of see and hear it. It like snugs up, and that way you know you're good to go. You can store beer in here safely as long as you cleaned and sanitized everything perfect. It's not gonna go bad. So folks that are doing like aging stouts or whatever, you can, in a clean, oxygen-free environment, you're gonna be perfectly fine. So, two things. One, we're gonna talk about keg maintenance, and we already mentioned replacing all the gaskets when you first get it. And two, we're gonna talk about cleaning or purging a cleaned and sanitized keg. So it is 100% ready to use once your next batch of beer is complete. So, keg maintenance. I take all the components off, gaskets, O-rings, dip tubes, about twice a year. And I just put them in a big bucket of PBW, let them completely soak and get clean, reassemble everything, and I usually replace the gasket at that time, which is redundant, but I don't feel like coming out and realizing that one of my O-rings was bad and I leaked 5 gallons of beer and lost my tank of CO2, all because of a 10-cent gasket. So maybe redundant. In between uses, I will completely clean the keg after it's used. So I've got a sprayer nozzle on a hose. You just point it down at the bottom. There's gonna be a little bit of trube down in there, especially with bigger beers. So spray all that to where it's visually clean. So in between uses, outside of that deep cleaning in the PBW, I just spray out the bottom and make sure that it's visually clean. I personally use a recirculating pump to inject that PBW up in there. If you don't have that, you can fill it to the brim with PBW and let it rest. And then once that's done, of course, rinse all of that out and then use Star San to sanitize the inside. So what that looks like is you have your sanitizer solution, you put, I don't know, like half a gallon in there, and you just take that keg and you just rock it until every surface on the inside is happy. Which then leads us to the next step, completely sanitizing and purging a keg. So this keg, I have it tagged here, so cleaned and sanitized. What that means is I had this whole keg entirely full of sanitizer solution. I hooked up the blow off from my last fermentation to the gas post, and then I had a liquid out. So that was just a connector just like this, where that liquid could get out. And I used the natural CO2 from that fermenter to push CO2 into this, pushing the sanitizer out. So I've essentially displaced all of that sanitizer, ensuring that every single nook and cranny in this keg was touched by sanitizer, and there's no oxygen, because there can't be oxygen in there, because it has been completely purged of that liquid. So now I've recycled the natural CO2 that came off of the fermenter, and I know that I have a perfectly sanitized keg. And then part 2 of that is I removed the liquid post, which means nothing else can come out once it was empty, and I let the pressure build up to like 8 or 10 PSI inside this. So now it's purged and under pressure. So I can lift this poppet, and I know that it's holding its pressure, and it is perfectly ready for me to use to do a oxygen-free transfer when I am ready with the next beer. So the only other thing that I want to show you is the keg cleaner that I have. The particular one that I use, there's different versions. There's DIY versions that you can do with pool pumps. I got from More Beer, so let me show you that. Okay, so this is, I think it's called a bucket blaster. You can just search for keg cleaner on More Beer or Amazon or wherever you're buying your equipment. Obviously, I'll put the links down below to make this easy for you. But essentially what this is a self-contained keg cleaning system. And you can use it for other things too, like fermenters and stuff. But what's happening here is we've got the liquid post and the gas post, and that branches off from this center line. What you do is you just hook these up to your keg, like so. Obviously with the lid off. I just dropped the lid and the other components directly down into this bucket where we have the PBW solution. So this sits neatly inside this bucket, and you fit that right over the top and you plug it in. That is going to shoot PBW up into this keg, basically getting on all the surfaces, kind of a clean in place type idea without a ball. And it's also shooting that PBW through your liquid post and your gas post, making sure that all of that's cleaned out too. So I'll do that, reuse the PBW for something else, and then rinse with water, and then put, just put water in here and let it recirculate, so then it's all clean. The only thing left to do would then be to sanitize the keg before use. So this is a nice to have. You do not need this, especially getting started. Don't get fancy things like that. There's ways to DIY it, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with the, hard jet spray from your hose. Make sure everything is clean. Do your PBW rinse and then star sand before you use it. That's all you need. Again, this is one of those nice to haves. There's super fancy versions that you can definitely get into, but I've never needed it, and I have a 6-tap line, so this little guy gets a lot of use. I'll just line all my kegs up and boom, 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 boom. Go through a cleaning day while I'm cleaning all the draft lines as well. So this makes it really nice that I can kind of set it and forget it. That's why I use it. So in your homebrew setup, one of the biggest steps up in your game is to move from bottling into kegging. So I'm gonna show you the anatomy of a keg, and essentially what's the biggest difference is the amount of work that you put into bottling day goes way down, because you're gonna transfer the whole amount of beer into a single keg, carbonate in that single keg. You can do oxygen-free transfers, you can set up taps. It's a pretty big step up in the home brewing journey. There's absolutely nothing wrong with bottling. I think that this made the hobby stick for me, because I really liked having things on tap, and it was a game changer for me. Instead of having to keep track of who I'd given bottles to, clean them, do all of the things, and it gave me the ability to do oxygen-free transfers. Again, in my opinion, If I hadn't moved to kegging, I probably would have given up on the hobby pretty early because of all the benefits that this brought. So I have a 10-gallon torpedo keg in front of us. The anatomy is the exact same for Cornelius kegs, or you'll see them called Corny kegs, of different sizes. So there's 5, 10, 15, I've seen 20. Usually if you're doing volumes like that, you're moving up to Sankey kegs, which is the traditional ones that you'll see at like bars or tap rooms. So in home brewing, this is the most common keg. You can get them on any of the online distributors. They're usually used. These torpedoes are new, however. So yeah, let's get right into it. So as you can see, they are steel. They are supposed to be very clean on the inside, obviously. So the port on the top is oval, and that fits this style lid. This has a pressure relief valve, and essentially it fits right into the top. And then you lower these brackets, and that seals it on there. So that is a pretty simple design. You can get replacement lids. All of these things have parts that we're gonna maintain. So let's actually talk through those things. So the inside, right? So the in post, this is where the CO2 goes in. So the idea for dispensing beer out of taps is that you're putting CO2 into the keg, and that pressure is gonna wanna push the beer out. So the in post is short. That's all it is on the inside. And you've got little gaskets here that keep that pressure in. And so that fits right into that. These posts are spring loaded. They have a poppet that fits inside of this housing. The gas side usually has notches on there, or like a star or ridged edge. So that just fits right in there. So these are all rubber, so it keeps that pressure in there. So that is what keeps Humpty together. So this screws right on. I've lubricated these. I am going to show you how to lubricate these as well. So to tighten these, I have a simple socket. So the deep socket that fits on there. Does not have to be too tight. It is a rubber gasket after all. The outside, or I say the outside, so the outpost of this is actually, the inside is a little bit different because it houses a dip tube. This dip tube goes all the way down to the bottom. So as CO2 pushes down from the top, the beer wants to escape from the bottom. That's how you get the full volume out. So that lives, and that rests right above the bottom of the keg. Same idea here with the spring on the inside holding that poppet in place. So you just line it up. When you are doing a deep cleaning, you would remove all of these pieces, let them soak in PBW or whatever cleaner you are using, rinse and sanitize everything, put Humpty back together again, lubricating all of these O-rings and gaskets. It is a good idea to keep an eye on those because they can wear out over time. And what would happen essentially is you're either going to be leaking beer or CO2. Either one is bad news. So keeping an eye on these is a good idea. I generally replace them about once a year, whether they need it or not. They're extremely cheap to the O-rings, and I just feel like it's better safe than sorry. So now we're gonna talk about the lid, and I'm gonna show you how to lubricate them. All right, so the last step, and this is part of kind of the maintenance and use, the last step in sealing up your keg once your fermenter has been transferred in there. If you're doing oxygen free, you've got it's purged and sanitized inside. But basically, before you put the lid on for good for that batch, you wanna make sure that these gaskets and O-rings are all lubricated. And so as I'm doing maintenance, I will put keg jelly on them. There's different brands. It kind of doesn't matter which one you use, as long as it's food grade. So that means that there's no, aroma or smells or anything that's toxic to the final drink, because that's no bueno. So this also, by the way, is when you're lubing your O-ring, is always an awkward time for your wife to walk in. It will inevitably happen. You have to explain it for 3 minutes. So what this right here is the gasket that goes on the lid, which is actually what seals to it. You just take a little bit of lube on there, and I just run it around the whole outside. You do not need gloves, but this stuff is sticky. So you actually do the same thing for the O-rings that are on your gas in and gas out poppets. Both the poppets and the rings that are around the top. And then basically what I do is I just slip it over the top, try to not touch it, because again, it will get everything that it touches sticky. So now that can rest just like that, and it's good, and it is, it'll keep the plastic or the rubber supple so that you get a clean seal. What happens if you don't have a clean seal is you could either leak your CO2 out of the top, or worst case, something can get into the keg. Highly unlikely, but it could happen, and that can lead to an infection or something undesirable. So a little bit of lube goes a long way, and that goes for many areas of life. However, in brewing, this is an important tool to use. Okay, folks, that is just about everything that you need to know about kegs. We can talk about carbonating in there. There's a lot of different topics that we can get into, but we will save that for the next videos.